Hello, my beautiful ladies. Thank you for joining us today. We have a very serious topic today. I'm going to share a very personal story of mine with you. And I do want to share it, but a part of me does not want to share it. But Spirit asked me to share it with you. And it's a very touchy subject, so bear with me as we go through the podcast. It is about toxic people in our lives. And I know some of us have toxic people for sure in our lives. Some of us have toxic people in our family. And it may not be as easy to cut them out as if they were not in our family. So, I'm going to share a very personal story with you today about something that happened to me recently. And the reason why I think Spirit wants me to share this with you is more for guidance because it's a very tricky situation. And it's especially tricky when you don't feel supported or backed up by others around you. And so I'm going to dive into it. And I hope that by me sharing my story of what happened to me in recent events will help you in some way in your life that you can possibly take some of the do's and don'ts and apply them as your heart guides you. So, as a lot of you are aware, my dad was very ill and passed away this past March. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go to Newfoundland and to spend extra time with my mom and dad. And my dad was declining very slowly at first. Some might think quickly. I say it was slowly, in meaning we had about 6 months where we knew it was coming. But of course, you don't really know the time frame. But we were very fortunate that we had that time with him to be able to, express our love and really try to fulfill his wishes as best as we could. So it became very tricky for me because I was in Newfoundland visiting and staying with my parents. And of course, I live in Alberta. So when I'm in Newfoundland, I do stay at my mom and dad's house. So we have someone in the family that I would consider to be extremely difficult, would be putting it mildly. And I am typically a very vocal person. And so it's very challenging for me when I am in a situation where you're trying to keep the peace on one side, but the other side of you is, for the love of God, I have to be able to stand up to this person. And then in my particular situation, my dad and my mom, but particularly my dad, really does not want you to say anything to anyone to create waves. And so, what does a person do when you literally have someone on their deathbed and you know that one of their wishes would be for me to be quiet and to just let the other person have their say, and it's usually at someone else's expense. And so, what do you do when you're in that situation? So, I'm going to get very personal into the story in hopes that it will help someone who's listening. So I feel that I was raised to always stand up for other people, and especially to stand up for someone if they are being bullied. And I'm very fortunate to be able to say that I haven't been in those situations very often, but the times that I have been in those situations, thank you, Lord, I have had the courage to speak up and help anyone that was in need. And I know that in particular now, this is a very big situation that comes up often, even because of our social media platforms and different things like that. So it really goes to the core of your character, I feel, and your integrity. So when I was in Newfoundland, it was very taxing because dad, toward the end, was very, very, very ill. And he was wishing to be home, but for a time, he had to be in the hospital. And it was very stressful because we literally thought he was going to pass away, and any day we didn't know. The doctor called the family in. So, as you can imagine, it's a very stressful time for everyone. Now, of course, it is stressful for the children, but I just really want to acknowledge how stressful it is for the spouse. And in particular, for my mom and dad, they were together for almost 70 years, married and, dating time combined. And so I just cannot imagine the emotional state that my mom was in internally when you're literally watching your love of your life and your lifelong partner um, in a hospital bed, and there's nothing you can do, and you're just literally waiting for them to pass. And the doctors, have already said call in the family, so the time is short. And so this is where the story gets very interesting. There's someone in our family who, to be honest, I try to avoid because I do not like confrontation. And I personally try to really be very aware of the space that I am creating around me. So, whatever family environment I have in Alberta is very peaceful, and that is done by design, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But the situation that I found myself in was my mom, of course, was very tired because we were staying at the hospital. Because one of my dad's wishes was he didn't want to die alone. So my mom spent almost every night sleeping at the hospital. And it was very taxing for everyone because in the beginning, we were literally sleeping on chairs, and you can't get a comfortable night's sleep, anyways. Of course, because they're always coming in to check on the patient, or there's an emergency of some sort, either with my dad or someone else. And so my mom one night was driving back from their house because she did take time to go home and get a shower. And so some of us would stay at the hospital with dad. She would have time to go back and get a shower, and then she'd come back again. And normally she didn't drive herself, but this one particular night, she was driving herself, and another family member drove behind her. I believe I wasn't there, but I'll give you the best of the details as I know them, as they were shared with me by a couple of different people. So basically, my mom was driving back to the hospital to see my dad. and she took the wrong turn. So instead of going a certain way to go up the ramp to get onto a highway, she basically turned onto the wrong ramp and was going into oncoming traffic. Now, in a major city, this could be very serious, but thankfully, this occurred in rural Newfoundland and there were very little to none traffic around. Now, the family member that was driving behind her uh, really overreacted and freaked out and started getting very aggressive with my mom. First, by holding down the horn, and we would call that just lacing on the horn, in Newfoundland. And then, to my understanding, driving at a very, very slow pace after they got in front of her that was way under the speed limit and holding up a lot of other traffic as they got back onto Main Road. And then the true altercation that happened was in the hospital parking lot where this other person jumped out of their vehicle and started yelling at my mother, who's in her late 80s, and yelling at her with clenched fists, and they would not stop. So when they came into the hospital, they actually pulled me aside and they were sharing their account of the story with me. To be honest, I was so shocked, I couldn't even honestly respond. I responded as, I will say, diplomatically as I could in that moment, but I was really almost too shocked to even respond. And so, to be honest, I didn't even know what to do. And I know that a lot of us find ourselves in those situations, and it's like you just think to yourself, like, is this actually even happening? Like, what the hell's even going on? You know what I mean? So I took a night to process it because this happened at about, I'll say, 9 p.m. So I drove home, took the night to process it because I thought, oh my gosh, if I react right now, this is not going to be good. And of course, everyone's emotions are already heightened, and I'm well aware of that. So the question is, what do you even do? So I felt in my heart I had to stand up for my mother. Now she's a senior, but to be honest, even if she wasn't a senior, I still would have stood up for her. She is in a very vulnerable situation, regardless, because of the situation with my dad literally lying there. We're all waiting for him to pass. So I found myself having a conversation with this person and saying, it's not appropriate how you reacted to my mom. And this is where everything starts to blow up. So I tried to use what I call softeners, and I tried to be as graceful in my wording as I could be. I said, I understand, that we're all going through a difficult time, but this behavior cannot repeat itself. It was way too much for the situation. It's way too much for any situation, but I was trying to be kind in how I said it. And then the other person went from 0 to 100 in a matter of seconds. So I, of course, stood my ground and said, well, I can't help it if you don't like what I'm saying, but this is the boundaries that I'm setting. and I'm going to protect my mother, and I'm not going to bend on it. So then, as we fast forward the story a little bit, my dad is at home on a palliative care program. We were fortunate enough to get him moved from the hospital to our house by ambulance. And now I am forced to make a decision. This person who had this verbal altercation with my mom is now being invited into the house to see dad. What do you do in this situation? So again, I was trying to be understanding and diplomatic, but it's a very fine line because I'm wanting to stand up for my mom. I'm wanting to stand up for really what my boundaries are. You know, you can't have someone yelling at anyone, never mind an elderly person when their husband is terminally ill. But then I found myself in this situation where, what about standing up for me? Do I forgo all of my thoughts and feelings to appease my dad, who is literally on his deathbed? Do I forget about my feelings and set them aside because I know my mom and my dad are not going to want to create any waves? And it probably is even a bit deeper than that. Sometimes when you have someone toxic in your family, the people that are surrounded by that toxicity, they truly, from my point of view, can't see it. And I thought this was rather fascinating because remember, even though I'm part of the family, I live on the other side of the country. I don't go home very often. And when I do to visit, I'm not really around this other person very often by design because this person has a tendency to do this or this type of what I would call toxic behavior. So I really found myself in quite the predicament. And to be honest, I didn't see it coming. So I said to my parents, you have to make a decision. We're all adults, and I'm going to say it as respectfully as I can because personally, I don't believe in shouting or yelling or swearing. I think we should all have the emotional capacity to be able to speak to one another calmly. And again, if you can't, by design, I will not have you in my life. I do expect that of the people around me. So I said to my mom and dad, I am here to help you. And they really needed my help because my dad's medication needs were a lot for probably even a nurse. And none of us had training. So it was a lot for my mom. She would probably find it too much to handle. So again, it put you in the predicament, would you even leave, right? So I said to them, I cannot be in this other person's space. Every time I'm putting myself in this other person's space, they are creating a toxic level that I am not willing to withstand. And so I said, I don't have to be here, but of course I would love to be here to help you. but I cannot do it at my own expense. So I want you guys to talk about it. And if you're willing to set some boundaries with this particular person, I'm okay with that. But if there are no boundaries, and if this person can come in and just wield their toxicity freely, I'm not participating. So my dad, who literally could barely speak at this point, he was losing his voice. He said, "Well, I do appreciate how you can communicate your feelings. And I'm going to leave this up to your mother because I'm very, very ill." And I said, "Okay." And then my mom said, "I do agree with you. And I do see your point in this situation. And so I will set some boundaries." But I want to share with you that inside of me, I don't know if I've ever had that level of an internal struggle before because the stakes were very high. I was struggling because I didn't want to leave my mom, who was under an incredible amount of stress at that time. But another part of me felt my warrior energy come out. And that warrior energy is what I want to focus on for a moment because we all have it. And I said to myself, I cannot and I will not let you down. I cannot and I will not be a doormat for anyone else anymore. Can't do it. My integrity and my character are more important to me right now. My mental well-being. And believe me, it's a test because remember the situation. My dad is literally going to pass away any day. And I'm saying, these are my boundaries. And I'm well aware if I get on a plane and fly home, he could very well pass away at any day. But this is the problem. I cannot control everyone else. I cannot control my parents who want to be loving, which I understand. But are you willing to be loving at the expense of yourself and at the expense of your own well-being? I can't do it. Not only can't I do it, but I also am not going to witness it. So the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because someone could say, well, that's my wife, that's my daughter, that's my sister, that's my best friend for 30 years. Fill in whatever blank you're experiencing. But for me personally, no one, not one person, not your mother, not your father, not your spouse, not your kid, no one has the right to yell at you, to abuse you in any way, shape, or form. They don't have the right to swear at you. They don't have the right to call you a bad name. They just don't have the right. And if they think they have the right, which some people do think that, the power lies within you, not them, you, to make the decision for yourself. Am I going to allow that behavior? And believe me, I know it's easy. You can make up 52 different excuses about why you will allow the behavior or why you should allow the behavior. But I'm here to say no. For me, I'm not allowing it. So I said to my parents very respectfully, I love you. I will do anything to help you, but these are my boundaries. I do not want that other person coming into the house when I'm here. And I'm not going to allow that behavior in my presence. Now, when I leave and go back and get on the plane and go back to Alberta, I cannot control what occurs here. If you want my help, I will be glad to help you. But now I can help you when I'm in your presence. When I leave, that baton is handed over to you, and you now are the only person holding the power. If you feel for some reason that this person is holding a power over you and you want help in standing up to them, no problem, I will help you. But I can't do the work for you. I cannot set the rules for you. You must set the rules. And the reason I'm sharing this is, as a parent, we could have a child that gets into an abusive relationship. If I could magically remove the person, it's not going to help unless my child that is dating that person or married to that person, whatever the situation is, they're the one that has to hold the power and set the boundaries and the guidelines for when I'm not there. I can come in and try to save you, but you must save yourself at some point. And what do you do when you stand up for that person? Because I'm sure we've all seen these situations. And then when you leave, the behavior continues. And unfortunately, the people around are all allowing, justifying, making excuses or allowances for that toxic person and their behavior. What do you do? I personally decided to distance myself from the situation because, again, I cannot control the world. I cannot control whoever it is, that's being abused. I could wish it for them that they would stand up for themselves. I could wish it for them that they would create better boundaries. But honestly, I found it so fascinating because, to be honest, I don't even think that they saw what I saw. I think they've been in it for so long, they just couldn't even see it, which I thought was mind blowing because I said, what's going on here? I was raised with integrity and character and courage to stand up for other people. And you're the ones who taught me that. So why aren't you standing up for yourself? And I really think that sometimes love, because, as parents, of course, we do love our children. And so imagine if you have a child that is having toxic behavior. You're not going to not love them, but boundaries are crucial. And what happens if they don't respect the boundaries? Because some people cannot. Then it leads me to my next point, which I hope you can really breathe in. If they literally cannot or will not respect your boundaries, whether it's a child or a spouse or a parent, how I have designed my life is that I will create distance, I will be very vocal, and I will tell you, sorry, you cannot be part of my life if this is how you're going to try to treat me or treat others. And it's not an easy road. But I wanted to share this story today because Spirit is really letting me know that someone really needs to hear this today. And if you look at my family, my parents were such a blessing. I could not have asked for better parents. If I literally was going to write out a wish list, they would have exceeded it. But there's always someone. That's what I always say. There's always someone somewhere who wants to test us and push our boundaries. And Spirit wants to say to you that if you find your inner warrior and your inner courage and that inner fire that's burning in your soul, you can stand up for yourself. And maybe this conversation will give you that opportunity to really think about it before the action happens again. I always joke and say, I'll come up with a really good comeback like literally 3 days later. And 3 days later is no good. So in the moment, sometimes I'm so appalled by someone's behavior. I'm just so shocked. Honestly, it takes all of my words away. And so I'm one of these people that I need a little bit of time to process. But I also feel that to serve me, I don't want to be sick anymore. And I've had a lot of illness in the last 10 years. And I find with women, sometimes we're not comfortable with speaking up or saying something. And when these crucial matters are on the table, if you don't stand up for yourself or for someone else that really matters to you, or in my case, I would really want to stand up even for a stranger. I don't need to know them. That's the need I have inside of me. And if I don't speak up verbally, that would fester inside of me. And it's almost as if it eats me alive from the inside out. And it creates this emotional distress and illness. And when you go and you start looking for the cause of the illness, you start hearing, oh, these test results came back great. Oh, you should feel fine. I didn't realize it until later in life that might not be showing up when you go to the doctor's office, but when your energy is so depleted, or sometimes people have different diseases that pop up, a lot of that is when you push your feelings down and down and down and down. And a lot of times we as women will push them down and try to keep the peace. And remember, I was raised by two parents who they do want to keep the peace. And I do too, because I love a peaceful household. But if you have someone coming in trying to wield their power unnecessarily and creating a toxic environment, no, not on my watch. You don't get to do that. And I will share with you that I was very proud of myself for standing up. I, of course, would stand up for my mom, no questions asked. But I could not just sit and act normal, with air quotes, if they were to invite that person back into the house while I was sitting there. No, I can't do it. I want to lead a life of integrity. And sometimes that means I'm going to be a little uncomfortable. So I just wanted to share that with you so that you could see how I was able to handle that in that very difficult moment. And I hope that you can see some light at the end of that tunnel, because it's a lot of pressure when you have someone in your circle that comes in and creates a lot of toxic moments when they're not necessary. And then I'd love to share a part of the solution with you. And it's a little bit maybe more long term. But when I left Newfoundland years ago, I really wanted to create a very peaceful, loving, joyful environment, really, because that's what I saw when I was growing up, with my parents. And so I'm very careful of who I let into my inner circle. And even when I was working at my business, that was when I was over on the corporate side in insurance, I made it very clear, even when I was hiring people, any drama in this office, you'll be removed. And a lot of people over the years that worked there told me that they really appreciated that because they had come from other toxic environments prior to our office. And I myself had a toxic situation in another work environment, which led me to open up my own office. And the reason why I'm sharing it is because it is possible to create your own beautiful family. You can choose to have a beautiful best friend or a very kind and loving partner. You can allow these people in, but on the flip side, when you have toxic people in your life, are your boundaries right now maybe too low for the desired outcome that you're looking for? So if you're looking to create a life of peace, which of course most of us are, That includes your laughter and your joking. And there are going to be periodic conflicts when you're having relationships, but what are the parameters and the boundaries that you're willing to live with? And do you want to be hanging out with someone if they're doing other things that you would consider to be non healthy or toxic? For an example, to their own partner or to their children or to their other friends. So I would just maybe challenge you, but in a loving way, that if you sit and write down, because there's such power in the written word, if you write down what your boundaries are for, as an example, your arguments or discussions with your spouse, but also let your spouse know what your boundaries are. How could they know? If you don't share them, they would never know. And I've done this very successfully with a partner, more than one. And so if you are aware of what you are choosing, either subconsciously or consciously or both, you do have the power to create your own beautiful family here on earth. And it also challenges you to really dig deep and really think about, what would I do in this situation? Would I feel comfortable standing up? And not everyone does. You could be out somewhere and a stranger could be getting attacked on the side of the street. I might jump in or someone else might jump in. But even if you're not comfortable jumping in, you could certainly phone 911. If we all just really listen to our hearts, and what is your heart really saying to you that you should do in that moment? And it's different for each one of us. But what do you want the end result to be? You, of course, want someone to treat you how you would want to be treated. And I want you to feel loved, just as I feel loved. And my wish for you is that you can create this beautiful, safe space for yourself because you deserve it. And oddly enough, back in the day, because I'm in my 50s, we didn't talk to our parents about things like this. And so I want to be able to share my voice so that maybe if you've never heard someone say, it's okay for you to stand up for yourself. It's okay for you to cut that toxic person out. It's okay for you to leave that person that's toxic. It's okay for you to set up boundaries. But it's really, really, really important that if the person does not respect your boundaries, no matter who it is, there have to be consequences. Because if that person just comes back repeatedly apologizing, sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. But even if they come back every time and apologize, that's nice in the moment. But in the situation of the person that I was involved with, every single time they're in my space, they are creating a toxic moment. And it may or may not be with me, but I'm still witnessing the toxic moments that they're creating. So, what does it say about me if I say, that's okay? I'll continue going into this space and allowing that behavior. I'm handing my power over to that person. So I'm suggesting that you take your power back because you have power and you also have courage. And you also are entitled to a safe space. So I really want you to live your life to the best that you can possibly live it. And I really want you to know that you have the power to design that life. And I really believe that you're braver than you know, and probably braver than you think. So I hope, my beautiful ladies, that my story resonates with you and you can pull some goodness out of there. It was a little difficult for me to share it, but I'm glad I did, because my wish for Shine Your Light is that I want to be able to get on here and speak to you as if you came over to my house for a visit and you sat down beside me on the couch. And I truly want to be as open and as vulnerable and as honest with you through this platform as I would be if you were coming over and sitting down beside me in my house. Because I really think that it's important for us to connect heart to heart and soul to soul in order for you and for I to get that depth of the relationship and that depth of the love that we're really needing and wanting. Because I think when one woman can show up for the other woman, it creates this burning desire in her to be her very best self. So until the next time, my beautiful ladies, shine, baby, shine.